regular meeting of City Council for May 24, 2022. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez.
Here?
Councilmember Snedden.
Here.
Councilmember Friedman.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Harmon.
Here.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Present.
Councilmember Jordan.
Here.
And Mayor Rouse.
Here, thank you. We had a closed session. I'm going to ask Mr. Cullen to report out. Mr. Cullen, please.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor. In a 12 p.m. special meeting, the City Council conducted a closed session to consider whether to initiate litigation. On a motion by Councilmember Jordan, seconded by Councilmember Friedman, the Council voted 6-0 with Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez absent to initiate litigation to quiet title to a sewer easement on or about 444 Las Alturas Road. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Administrator, are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes, Mayor Rouse.
Okay, very good. We'll go to public comment. I have a few speaker slips here. It'll be 3 minutes per speaker, and I'll call your name, and please come forward and say what you need to say. I have Eddie Taylor first. Eddie Taylor will be followed by, if I get this right, Liam Gallo. Thank you. Mr. Taylor.
Good afternoon, council members, mayor. I'm here representing the United Way Northern Santa Barbara County's AmeriCorps Home for Good team, a few of whom you see in the back of the room, to address some comments, rumors, dare I say gossip, that has been shared throughout the community regarding our program. Many in the communities have been misinformed and are under the impression that the United Way is no longer involved in addressing homelessness through the Home for Good initiative. That's not true. When we started Home for Good, we meant exactly what it says in the title of our program, Home for Good. Not home for a little while and then back on the streets. So that's what this program is designed around, housing retention. So I want to share a couple of facts with you. Our AmeriCorps program, which started 6 years ago, has grown to 30 full-time equivalent members distributed throughout the county, working with county departments and nonprofit organizations. They're dedicated to assisting veterans and people experiencing homelessness in every city. In 2018, the United Way accepted the responsibility as the lead agency to work with the county and develop what's called the Coordinated Entry System. We organized more than 20 partners in that system. We populated the Homeless Management Information System with usable data for the county to decide how to best approach and assist the unsheltered homeless population in our cities. And our responsibilities under the contract ended in August of 2020. The lead responsibilities were then transferred to the County Housing Community Development Department. So in the past 2 years, during the pandemic, AmeriCorps workers were responsible for participating in or wholly responsible housing 535 individuals of the 700 that you'll read about in the county reports. They also assisted 75 veterans and housed 30 of them. We began to focus the AmeriCorps workers' efforts more on housing retention, again, home for good, so we could provide opportunities for them to become stable and self-sufficient. We maintain 6 AmeriCorps members working on the staff at the United Way under the banner of Home for Good, charged with housing retention and continued outreach in partnership with all of our various partners. And we've applied for a third 3-year contract with the AmeriCorps program. We expect its approval next week. The financial support from our donors and grantors helps us to continue the level of work that we do and have the kind of results that we get, including mobile shower operations and partnerships with churches and various other organizations outside of the Coordinated Entry System. We can continue to have the same results with our partnerships with the nonprofits and everyone else, and so we're asking you as community leaders and employees of the city to please come to us first. When you hear something, ask us, because our first question is always going to be to you, how can we help? Our second question is going to be, can we have an impact? I hope that you will reach out to this team and learn more about the work that they do. And if I have any seconds left, darn. Thank you.
Liam Gallo, please, followed by Nick Kuntz.
Good afternoon, City Council members. I'm here to reiterate United Way's involvement in homeless services provision and the importance of the AmeriCorps program, the Santa Barbara County AmeriCorps Partnership for Homelessness and Veterans. During the pandemic, you'll see on this sheet that we had 39 AmeriCorps members in the service term from 2020 to 2021. We housed over 500 homeless individuals through COVID. We assisted 75 veterans. And over 1,900 individuals were provided direct homeless services. As of our mid-year report this year, we have housed 282 houseless individuals, 120 veterans have been assisted, and 2,733 individuals have been provided direct homeless services. In our next term, our focus moving forward will be housing placement, housing retention, life skills, wraparound services, support services to reduce the risk of returning to homelessness, and increasing the quality of life. I wanted to also, on a personal note, address a rhetoric that I encounter in my work as an AmeriCorps program coordinator. This idea that providing homeless services attracts homelessness. That is not true. The people around you are not strangers, they're not foreigners, they're our neighbors. They are former Santa Barbara homeowners, former Santa Barbara renters who were one life circumstance away from becoming homeless, and it happened to them. It could happen to me. Studies show that you are exponentially more likely to become homeless if you have to devote 30% or more of your income towards rent or towards a mortgage payment. And 49% of Americans have to do that. We are nearly all of us at risk of becoming homeless at one life circumstance change. And so as advocates for the residents of Santa Barbara, I implore you to take on this idea that homeless services is vital to the city and to the county, and that it does not attract homelessness. In fact, the point in time count earlier this year identified that we had a jump in number from the year 2019 of homeless folk from about 1,700 individuals to about 1,900 individuals identified. And you'll be happy to know that the number of people being housed is also rising. So it was almost matched by a number of over 200 people identified by the Good Samaritan shelter. That data was collected from them. It rose with the number of people that are also becoming homeless. So to close, I'd like to say that when they ask you, how do we solve homelessness? Why aren't we doing anything about homelessness? Homelessness is solved for an individual every day. Someone becomes housed, and that problem ends for them. They can put it behind them. They can start becoming productive members of our society, even though they already are, in my opinion. So please keep that in mind in your advocacy for us, the citizens of Santa Barbara, that homeless services is an essential thing.
Thank you. Nick Kuntz.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, City Council members. I'm here today to share concerns about the continued lack of accessibility with respect to dining in the public right-of-way. Most of you were here 2 years ago when I spoke in favor of the Emergency Economic Recovery Ordinance, which allowed for construction in the public right-of-way. You may remember that I begged you to require safeguards to ensure accessibility for the disabled members of this community. Since then, in my capacity as a member of the city's Access Advisory Committee, I've continued to advocate for enforcement of state and federal accessibility requirements. Today, 2 years later, only a small minority of public accommodations operating in the public right-of-way are accessible. The perfunctory enforcement efforts have been limited to a few blocks of State Street, while the problem goes unabated all over town. As well-intentioned as the Emergency Economic Recovery Ordinance may have been, it effectively undermined the civil rights of the disabled members of this community. By allowing this to continue, you have effectively circumvented all safeguards intended to ensure that state and federal accessibility requirements are met. City staff does not have the resources nor direction to correct these injustices. Only you can correct this by explicitly directing the city administrator to do so. You have given away free use of some of the most valuable real estate in the world. We should have licensing agreements from every business operating in the public right-of-way, explicitly contingent upon meeting all state and federal accessibility requirements. We should be collecting fees for the use of this public property, and we should revoke the license of any business that does not abide by their license agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. And do we have anyone online, Madam Clerk?
We have one speaker online, Jed Hazard. Jed Hazard, you can unmute yourself and speak.
Good afternoon. My name is Jed Hazard, and I'm a fifth-generation Santa Barbarian.
Are you supposed to be able to see him? Go ahead.
I need to address the one-way conversion on the 400 block of Anacapa Street. I hold the master lease for 410 Anacapa and have occupied this building for almost 20 years. In 2017, I signed a new 20-year lease that keeps me on Anacapa until 2037. We operate a promotional goods company out of this location and do product fulfillment for many local corporations. We have contracts with Sonos, Decker, Tobes, and Procore, to just name a few. During any holiday time and special events, this location deals with all of our direct shipping and trucking. We generally will have UPS, FedEx, or DHL feeder trucks delivered to this location to handle movements of shipments. Give me 1 second, sorry. Currently, these
Okay,
trips require-
Mr. Hazard?
Yeah.
You're on an item that we have coming up on consent. We're not there yet. So,
I asked this morning through an email where I should do this, and they told me to do it here. I
you do it when we announce the consent, which is coming up very quickly here. So just give us a moment here. I'll give you back some time.
Okay.
All right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that concludes public comment. Can we have, do we have some items to read on the consent calendar, Madam Clerk?
Yes, we do. We have 4 items to read. Item 2, introduction of an ordinance establishing speed limits. Recommendation is that council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the council of the city of Santa Barbara amending section 10.60.015 of the Santa Barbara Municipal Code establishing prima facie speed limits on certain portions of Anapamu Street, De La Guerra Street, Garden Street, Las Positas Road, and Modoc Road. Item 3, introduction of ordinance to amend Municipal Code Section 10.60.030 to change the one-way designation on the 400 block of Anacapa Street. Recommendation is that council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending the municipal code by amending section 10.60.030 to change the one-way designation on the 400 block of Anacapa Street. Item 4, adoption of resolution accepting grant funding for library to launch new teen part internship program. The recommendation is that council A, adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending resolution number 21-045, adopting the budget for fiscal year 2022 for $100,000, and B, accept the California State Library grant, and C, approve an increase in revenue and expenditure appropriations in the library's miscellaneous grants fund in the amount of $100,000 funded by the California State Library to launch new library internship program. Item 5, adoption of resolution authorizing the execution and delivery of an equipment schedule for 2 fire apparatus. Recommendation is that Council A, approve a best interest waiver under Santa Barbara Municipal Code Section 4.52.070 for one Pierce Manufacturing, Inc. 1,500-gallon fire apparatus for the price of $874,979. B, approve a best interest waiver under Santa Barbara Municipal Code Section 4.52.070 for one Pierce Manufacturing, Inc. Pierce Arrow 107-foot Ascendant aerial fire apparatus for the price of $1,620,000. $620,797. And C, adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara authorizing the execution and delivery of an equipment schedule to the Master Equipment Lease Purchase Agreement for the acquisition, financing, and leasing of certain equipment for the public benefit within the terms provided herein, authorizing the execution and delivery of other documents required in connection therewith, and authorizing the taking of all other actions necessary to the consummation of the transactions contemplated by this resolution. And that ends the items needed to be read.
And very good. And Madam Clerk, would you read item 7 as well, please?
Yes, item 7, agreement between the Library Department and Family Service Agency of Santa Barbara for support services and outreach to individuals experiencing homelessness.
All right, very good. Does anybody on council need to pull an item? All right, very good. We will return to item 3, and Mr. Hazard, are you still online?
Yes, I am.
Okay, very good. So you've introduced
Wait,
yourself and your business.
I think that,
Yes, he's online, okay.
okay.
So go ahead and continue with item 3 now with the thing about Anacapa Street.
I think he's still muted. Mr. Hatter, if you could unmute yourself? Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what you guys heard. Should I start over?
No, we heard that you had the lease on the business and you were on Anacapa Street and who you provided service to, I think. So you can go ahead with
Okay.
start in the middle, if you would, please.
Okay, okay. During any holiday time or special events, this location deals with a lot of direct shipping and trucking. We generally will have UPS, FedEx, and DHL feeder trucks, which are semi-rears, delivered to this location for us to fill. And then we ship them out the following day. These types of trucks currently require both lanes to exit or enter our facility. Changing the single block of Anacapa doesn't really make sense to me and most of our neighbors as well. Some of the local businesses will be negatively impacted and no longer be able to have hauled shipments to their location. Parking for large semis and tow trucks on this block is currently needed. And if it's changed to both lanes, I don't see where they will be able to stop, to load, or unload. The trucks will still keep coming, and I have to imagine that we're going to end up with some accidents. It becomes 2 ways all the way up to Haley, and then vehicles will have to turn right on the 500 block. I believe that we will end up with lots of head-on accidents from this, being that I've owned real estate in this town for years and witnessed these at different locations like this one. There is a 4x4 planter box at the end of my street to deter people from driving up it, and yet every day people drive around this planter to go head-on with traffic, not realizing what they've done. Huge increases once again in this block that it was never intended to handle it. I also believe that there are probably sight distance problems that will occur. So I beg you guys to leave this road the way it has been since the very beginning. The previous street on Gutierrez would be Santa Barbara, and it allows for traffic in both directions. I don't understand what we will gain from this, besides confusion and chaos. This alteration only puts State Street traffic on our street for a single block, and then routes it back onto Haley with an only right turn. There might be 3 or 4 businesses that benefit from this, and the dozens and dozens that will be penalized. Please take this into consideration before moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, very good. And I had a question about item 7. I see Ms. Caliente in the back. If you would come up just for a second, please. Hello. Question, so what type of, the personal services agreement, can you describe what that person would be and for the length of the contract intended?
This contract is with Family Service Agency to provide a clinical support worker at the library. It will be for 14 months, so it's for the rest of this fiscal year and the next fiscal year.
Okay. And so is this considered like a pilot program, or is something to see in perpetuity? What is your...
Mayor Rouse, yes, I do think that this is a pilot project to determine how we can provide services at the library and with the coordinated efforts citywide.
Okay, very good. Well, I don't need to take this separately. I just wanted some clarification. Thank you very much. And with that, is there any other public comment on consent? Okay, very good. I will entertain a motion.
I'll move the consent.
I'll second.
Moved by Freeman, second by Alejandro Gutierrez. We have a roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez?
Yes.
Councilmember Friedman?
Yes.
Councilmember Snedden?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harmon?
Yes.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez?
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan?
Yes.
And Mayor Rouse.
Aye. Thank you very much. Move on to the next item. Will you read the next item, please?
Yes, one moment. Our next item is a public hearing where quasi-judicial hearing rules apply to this item. The subject is appeal of the Single Family Design Board's approval of development at 1460 La Cima Road.
All right, very good. So this is a land use appeal. And these are quasi-judicial, easy for you to say, hearings, proceedings, and there's specific rules and format that are different than the normally things we normally do. So we will structure this in this manner. First, I'll ask for council members to disclose ex parte communications. There'll be the staff presentation. There'll be remarks from the Design Review Board if the representative is here. Questions from council on that section. There'll be a presentation by the appellant for 20 minutes. Remaining time will be tracked and awarded if rebuttal or closing remarks are needed. Followed by questions from council, presentation from the applicant, also 20 minutes. Questions from council, public comments, and then deliberations. So first off, can I ask my colleagues, are there any ex parte communications anybody needs to disclose? Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have met privately with both parties, with both the with both the appellant and the project owner, just at their request, and simply listened to their input from those meetings.
Very good. Are there any other further ex parte communication disclosures? Okay, and with that, we will proceed with staff presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Pilar Plummer. I'm the interim staff liaison to the Single Family Design Board. And this is Ellen Kokinda.
And I'm the acting design review supervisor. Good to see you.
So the purpose of this afternoon's hearing is a de novo review of the Single Family Design Board's decision to grant project design approval and final approval for
I
development.
need to interrupt, I'm sorry. The city amended its ordinance a while back. This is not a de novo review. You are limited to the record presented before the Single Family Design Board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification.
The development was approved by the Single Family Design Board on March 14th, 2022, and was subsequently appealed by Beth Collins on behalf of Scott and Katrina McCosker, who are neighbors at 1464 La Cima Road. The proposed project involves demolition of an existing garage and driveway in order to construct a new garage with an accessory dwelling unit located above. The project also includes demolition of the existing driveway, construction of a new driveway, retaining wall, associated site work. There's an existing deck on the property which will also be extended, and there's other minor improvements being proposed. you'll see an aerial view of the project site above. To the right is the existing residence, and to the left is the garage building. And just for reference, the neighbor who is the appellant is directly to the left. This is a view of the project site as viewed from La Cima Road. To the right, again, is the residence, and to the left is the garage building. This is another view from the project site. To the left is a view taken from the backyard, looking back up towards the property. And in the center of the screen, center of that photo, you'll see the neighbor's residence. They do have 2 windows that face this property. To the right, you'll see a north elevation looking west towards the McCosker's residence. And this is the existing deck on the property. So in general, accessory dwelling units are a ministerial application, so they typically do not have discretionary review by a design review body. An applicant can ask for variations from the architectural review criteria that are outlined in the ordinance, or to request a zoning modification. In this case, the purpose of the review is that the accessory dwelling unit is not constructed exclusively over a 500 square foot garage, but it also includes an interior stair at the lower level, so you'll see that on the floor plan. Other improvements that are being proposed on site, such as the deck extension and retaining wall, also require discretionary review, as the property is located in the Hillside Design District and exceeds 20% slope. The project was reviewed on 4 occasions, starting in July of 2019 through March of 2022. The initial 2 hearings were conceptual review only, and the project did evolve slightly over time. The original iteration did request a front setback modification, as the footprint of the building was located within the 20-foot front setback. At that hearing, the board did request that the applicant study locating the ADU behind or below the garage. And the neighbor at that hearing expressed some concern related to the location of the access stair, which was closer to their property. In September of 2020, the exterior stair access was relocated to address that concern to the area between the residence and the new accessory building. At that hearing, the board also requested the applicant study eliminating windows on the elevation facing the neighbor and to provide a landscape plan. In October of 2021, the project was scheduled for project design approval. At that hearing, the board still had some concerns about studying the south elevation facing La Cima Road, but did appreciate the removal of fenestration on the elevation facing the neighbor, and voiced general support of the project's size, of the project's bulk and scale. And of March 14th, 2022, originally postponed. The original hearing date was supposed to be scheduled for February 14th, but was postponed at the applicant's request to March 14th of 2022. The project was scheduled for both project design approval and final approval and was granted. And specifically at that hearing, the single-family design board noted that the project is compatible with the neighborhood in size, bulk, and scale. Specifically, the 2-story element is not contrary to other homes in the neighborhood. And just for reference, I have a few elevations that were included in that approved set. So this is the south elevation that is viewed from La Cima Road, so you can see the existing residence. And to the left, you'll see the new garage with the ADU above, slightly stepped back. And then to the bottom is the north elevation that's viewed from the backyard. And these are the east and west elevations. So the west is the elevation that would be facing the neighbor and appellant. So as far as appeal issues, following the single-family design board's decision on the project, the approval was appealed by Beth Collins on behalf of the neighbor, and citing a number of items, and they're generally as follows. That the project was scheduled for project design approval and final approval without the necessary information on the plans to assist the board in making their decision. general inconsistencies with the California Environmental Quality Act, and that the exemptions applied were not appropriate. General inconsistencies with the single-family residence design guideline, and concern regarding the noticing procedures and whether or not those were appropriately followed. In regards to scheduling, as part of the city's review process for discretionary projects, the plans were reviewed for application completeness, and this is a standard process where staff routes the plans to applicable divisions to ensure that the project is consistent with all required ordinances. This can include zoning, transportation, creeks for compliance with the stormwater management plan. This particular project went through several completeness reviews before being deemed complete, and therefore could be scheduled for project design approval. The project was also reviewed by the city's Creeks Division to be eligible for final approval as it relates to the city's Tier 3 stormwater requirements. And just as for reference, again, final approval is in general final details, colors, materials, and landscape improvements to be shown on the plans. The Single-Family Design Board's discretion is limited to design aesthetics, site planning, and architecture. And the Single-Family Design Board does have the ability to determine if sufficient information is provided in order to take action on a project. And lastly, as part of the city's process, the plans will be reviewed again to ensure compliance as part of the building permit review. The appellant also noted that the development may result in environmental hazards given the steep slope of the lot. The project will need to comply with standard building permit requirements and building code as part of building permit plan check. Staff in their review did determine that the project was exempt for further environmental review pursuant to California Environmental Quality Act 15301, existing facilities, and 15303, new construction or conversion of small structures. 15301 does allow for the demolition and removal of individual small structures, and 15303 allows for the construction of a new residence or accessory building such as a garage. The project does not have any project-specific or cumulative impacts that are expected. It will not damage scenic highways or historic resources, and the site is not identified as a hazardous waste site. The appellant contends that the project is not compatible with the neighborhood and poses consistency issues with the single-family residence design guidelines, ultimately impacting the board's ability to make the required findings in order to approve the project. The neighborhood overall surrounding the project site includes a mix of 1- and 2-story residences. The single-family design board is tasked with ensuring that development is compatible in design, material, and size, bulk, and scale with the neighborhood. And as previously discussed, the board reviewed the project on 4 occasions before it was ultimately approved and provided a variety of comments for the applicant to study. This included eliminating fenestration and lighting on the elevation facing the neighbor, adjusting the architecture so the upper floor appears stepped back, changing the direction of the gable, studying plate heights, relocating the ADU stairway access, which was, again, originally located closest to the neighbor. And in the motion for approval, the single-family design board noted that the project was consistent with the neighborhood in terms of size, bulk, and scale, that the design impacts on topography were justified, and the 2-story element was commensurate with the neighborhood. This particular project required 3 mailed notices, one for the first concept review in 2019, and then for the 2 project design approval hearings, first in October of 2021, and then a mailed notice for the original hearing scheduled for February 2021. That hearing date, as previously mentioned, was postponed to a date certain of March 14th, 2022, and that was noted in the agenda scheduling the postponement. The adjacent property owners and agent received courtesy email notification as interested parties, and this is consistent with the city and state government code requirements for noticing. So in conclusion, staff is recommending that you consider the appeal of Beth Collins on behalf of the McCoskers located at 1464 La Cima Road. And if council concurs with the single-family design board's determination, you can deny the appeal If council concurs with the appellant, you may uphold the appeal. And I do have slides relative to the findings that are required for the project. They were included in the council agenda report as well. And I'll be here if you have any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone here from the Single Family Design Review Board to make comment? I don't think I see anyone.
I do not see her at the moment. Vice Chair Kalas should be present. So we can see if she comes.
All
Maybe we
right,
can
very
reserve
good.
that
Are
time for a
there,
little bit later.
I'm sorry, okay. Well, we don't have her here right now. So what, are there questions from council for staff? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the appellant. And you have 20 minutes, and I will track that time, Ms. Collins, and you may reserve for rebuttal or use as needed.
I don't need to see the notes, it's okay. You can just play it. There you go. Thank you.
Anytime you're ready.
Mayor Rouse, council members, good afternoons. I am Beth Collins from Brownstein. I am a land use attorney representing the appellant Scott and Katrina McCosker. Here's a picture of the project site. It's up on Lacima Road in the Bel Air Knolls neighborhood in the city's Hillside Design District. The star is the project location. Here is the proposed project. There's a new trellis on the existing original converted garage, and then there'll be a new two-story ADU on top of a rebuilt garage, or a new garage, actually. Let me if I say it correctly. So there was mention from staff about ADUs, and I will talk to you a little bit about the fact that this is an ADU project. You still have purview over this project, even though it is an ADU. Why? It's in a hillside district. Why? It's a new garage, also new retaining walls, new trellis, and you have a variety of things that you have purview over related to this project, which I'll go into more detail later. Next, why are we here? The biggest issue with this project is that the Single Family Design Board acted without some key information. And we're asking this council to fix that mistake and just send us back to Single Family Design Board so that they have the correct information. What information was missing? There's some basic information missing. There's the existing and proposed slope are not shown on the plan, so we actually can't even know the height of this structure, and I'll explain more about that. Next, grading and structural engineering plans have not been submitted. They are required for final approval, but they're missing. So Single Family Design Board and the city lacks information necessary to know the height, to make the findings required for the neighborhood preservation ordinance and the hillside district and slope lot findings. Also, there is some inconsistency here with several single-family design guidelines. I'll hit on that, but really just kick us back to Single Family Design Board. We'll deal with that there, but I will cover that briefly in my presentation. So again, the goals of this appeal: rescind the Single Family Design final approval, send it back with just a request to have the complete information available and there before the Single Family Design Board to make its decision-making. So why is the information missing? Prove it to me. So the height. Here is the city's own explanation about building height limits and how you measure height. It's built into the municipal code that the height is always measured from natural or finished grade, whichever is lower, okay? Height isn't just measured at the front of a building, okay? When it's on a slope, it's measured throughout the building, and it's measured from either the finished or natural grade, whatever's lower. So this information is missing from the plan, so we cannot know the height of this proposed garage and ADU. So here, for example, is a west elevation of the proposed plans. You'll see there's no similar line here. You can see the finished and natural grade lines on the bottom on the city's own directions. That is missing here, okay? There are some lines, but they aren't labeled finished and actual grade, and you'll see that the height is even missing from this slide. So no existing and proposed grades shown, no height shown, okay? This is from the approved plans. This is another part of the approved plans you just saw from staff. The height is labeled on here as 21 feet and 6 inches. This is right when you're standing on La Cima looking at the front. For those of you who weren't at the site visit, this is the front on La Cima. There's no existing or proposed grade shown on this, so it's impossible to know the height here. Where on the structure is that height? And then you look at the height for the back. This is the north, so from behind the structure, you can see the second-story ADU with the garage below, and it's labeled as having a height of 26 feet, but again, you don't have any existing and proposed grades shown on the map, on the plan, so you can't know that. It's impossible to know the height. So why is this important, especially for this site? Well, there are 34% slopes on this site. This aerial shows the very steep backyards. The yellow is the proposed project site. You can see there that all the development on La Cima is shoved up against La Cima. Why is that? Because these backyards, and those of you who were on the site visit saw how crazy the slopes are in the backyard. They're shoved up on the front to minimize the height and to minimize the impacts from development on those slopes. So height and these slopes are directly relevant. Once you start shoving the development back, then of course the height increases, right? Because the height from the existing or proposed grade, whichever is greater, becomes larger when you shove it back on the slope. I should add also here, there was a mention at the site visit about the existing garage. You know, the existing garage has a modification on the front yard setback, as a lot of these houses along here. You see how the houses are pretty much in a line shoved up on La Cima? That's because they all have front yard setback, or a bunch of them have front yard setback modifications. The reason for that is to have the development up on La Cima instead of back on the slope. Modification was approved for the existing garage in 1995 on this project site, and then there was a carport modification approved in 1976. So here, for those who weren't on the site visit, this is a picture of the backyard. 34% slope. It's quite extreme. And this obviously has massive impacts on height of the structure. So here's the existing site plan. You can see the existing two-car garage shoved up close to La Cima, and you can see all those little lines there. Those are topographic lines. It shows the incredibly large grade in the backyard. Also, you see the prefab shed. Those of you who were on the site visit know that, this is a spoiler alert, the proposed project shoves the two-car garage all the way back where that prefab shed is and adds a second story. So it's adding a lot of height onto this very steep slope, and we don't know how much height. So here's the first proposed plan. Notice the front line of the houses. The original proposition back in 2019 was to have just 2 feet 10 inches from the street, in the same way the house is, for the front of the ADU and new garage. Then you notice, oh, let me go backwards. Notice that, here. So the front is all lined up, but you see the back of the house? It sticks out a bit of the back of the house. So not surprisingly, when you look at the west elevation of that first proposed plan, you see a bit of the house peeking out behind, right? Notice again, no existing or proposed slope shown on any of these plans, no height shown on this plan. Now, for the approved plan, note, see the yellow box? There was a driveway added. The box was shoved back. Now it's lined up with the back of the house, okay? But look at it on the west elevation. It shows the car, and it shows the two-story structure, but the slope is in the same place, and in fact, you see the house peeking from behind. When you can't see it, there, you see how it's lined up in the back? So there's something wrong with these plans. They're missing the existing and proposed slope, they're missing the height. Again, if you go back to the 2019, you see that much of the house is peeking out when the yellow box is all the way on the front on the street. Here, 2022 plans, the same things there, same circle, but yet it's shoved back 20 feet magically, and there's a whole car. So this would be fixed if the existing and proposed slope could be put on the plans, and then single-family design board would know what it was acting on. Okay, what else is missing? Let's see here. Make sure I hit everything. Okay, there's also grading and structural. The staff report itself talks about that a grading plan is required for this project. There's a slope greater than 15%, and the grading exceeds 250 cubic yards. The staff report admits the grading plans were not included in the plan set that was before the Single-Family Design Board in March 2022. So, the staff report also admits that the only grading plans that were submitted were from October 2021 design, and that design is not the one that was approved. So, in short, the grading plans for this project that was approved were not before the Single-Family Design Board. What else is missing? There's a long list, and why do we know it's, some of you might be saying, well, why do we know it's required? Well, to get a final approval from the Single-Family Design Board, there's actually a final approval checklist that the city provides, and it lists everything you need, and that's what's required before you can get final approval. They just got final approval in March, and it's missing all these things. The plans are missing all these things that are highlighted in yellow. It's missing lighting, it's missing electrical plans, it's missing a lot of things. I'm not gonna go waste all our time going through all the things that are missing, but a key item, structural. There is no structural, and that the mayor actually asked about structural engineering at the site visit. We don't know how this large two-story structure is actually going to be held onto the hill because it has not been disclosed what the structural engineering is. We also don't have civil engineering, we also don't have grading plans. This shows the two-story structure and all of these retaining walls that are proposed. We don't have engineering on any of those walls. They're proposing to cut up the concrete of the existing driveway and make retaining walls, but it's not clear how that's going to be engineered. So we don't know the level of soil disturbance, the level of grading, the level of cut and fill. And with respect, that's really important information. It's on the checklist for a reason. It's needed for the Single-Family Design Board to take action. Again, this is a very steep slope. This is not your average backyard. We need this civil engineering, the structural engineering. So without that information, Single-Family Design Board lacked the information necessary to be able to make its findings. And I'll give you just a sample of a few findings that are important, they're required, and there's not information that the development, including the structure and grading, is appropriate for the site. You can't make that finding, or the Single-Family Design Board can't, without grading plans, topographical information, or civil and structural engineering. Also, there's a finding required that the development maintains a scale and form that blends with the hillside. Again, without the proposed height of the building known, you just cannot make these findings. The Neighborhood Preservation Ordinance also has findings about the proposed development being compatible and that it's a size, bulk, and scale are appropriate. We do not think it's compatible because the development is shoved back off of La Cima. We think it's more appropriate to be in line with all the other houses on La Cima. The Single-Family Design Board, for some reason, thought that not having a modification was a good idea here. We do not think that's correct. But more importantly, we don't even know the height, so how can we know the actual size, bulk, and scale of this structure? It's impossible. Next, good neighbor guidelines are, we have good neighbor guidelines. They are just guidelines, to quote Mr. Jordan, Councilmember Jordan. They are just guidelines, but they are guidelines, and there needs to be findings that these guidelines are being followed. And one of the guidelines is about neighbor privacy. I'll talk to you a little bit about that. One of the guidelines also talks about the plans having landscaping lighting that's appropriate. We can't even know whether the lighting's appropriate because the plans surprisingly don't include any lighting fixtures or electrical information. And again, that's required on the city's checklist. So just a little bit here on the single-family design guidelines and the Hillside District design guidelines. Again, everything yellow here, actually, we think there's a problem with, and that this project as approved violates, but I'll just give some highlights here. Projects should be less than 250 cubic yards of grading on hillsides. The cover sheet of the plans does say it's 283 cubic yards of grading, but it's unclear where that comes from because there are not grading plans and there isn't any engineering, so it's impossible to know the actual amount of cut and fill and the amount of grading. Next, the guidelines ask us to preserve slopes greater than 30% by avoiding grading and clearing, and again, we don't know what is actually being proposed because we don't have a full, complete plan set. The guidelines also ask that structures step down the existing topography. That has not been done. It talks about minimizing grading. I'm going to kind of go quickly through this. Here's some visuals, especially for those who weren't at the site visit. So you'll notice this is the impact of pushing the development off of La Cima. The yellow box is the new proposed garage. It'll be now 2-story, and you see the shed there, where it's over the shed. You saw that at the site visit for those who were there. So what's the impact on the neighbor? Again, I don't have the exact height. We don't have the benefit of story poles. Those would have been nice things to have in this project. But you'll see that there's the existing garage on the right. It's now going to be 2-story, and it's shoved out 20 feet. So that's the yellow box is my best approximation of the impact on the neighbor's privacy and views. This is from their living room. And this is another approximation. So material impacts. So I'm going to sum up so I can save some time for rebuttal in case necessary, but Single-Family Design Board is required to ensure projects comply with design guidelines. It is part of their task. It's not clear why the guidelines weren't discussed more. It's possible there was confusion about ADUs being an issue, but here's briefly on ADUs. State ADU law does allow the city to impose standards on an ADU. And again, here, this is a new garage, a new 2nd-story ADU. You can put limits related to parking, height, setback, landscaping, and architectural review. And nothing in the ADU law requires you to not do that. That was a good double negative. Anyway, ADU law allows you to put those restrictions, especially in a situation like that where you have extreme slopes. So in conclusion, we ask that you rescind the final approval granted and send this project back to the Single-Family Design Board and have them consider that project with a full set of information as is required by your ordinance and your own checklists, et cetera. Thank you so much for your time. I'm here. We'll reserve the rest, Mayor Rouse, for rebuttal.
All right, very good. You have 3 minutes and 5 seconds remaining on your rebuttal time. And are there questions from council of the appellant? All right, seeing none, we'll go to the applicant. You also have 20 minutes.
Great. Good afternoon. My name is Warner Young. I'm the architect of record for this project. I just want to start by saying that we are here and after 3 years of review by the city, We've been in front of the design review and through the city process for almost 3 years now. And we've answered many of the neighbors' concerns regarding placement of the garage structure and also the height requirements. And I'm not sure what the attorney was referring to, because the heights were called out on the site sections and also in the elevations. And so there's a set of plans that was given to the city, and so that the board was in full knowledge of the height and that we were below the minimum 30-foot height from natural grade. So it seems to be the biggest issue with this project, that they are questioning this height. This is their main concern, and also the loss of view from their property. So anyway, since the beginning, we've actually lowered the overall height of the building by 18 inches. We've actually produced a full set of civil engineering drawings that I have with me here, with the last iteration of the project, which is in general the same footprint. So we do have civil plans that were produced by a licensed civil engineer, Howard Whittosh. We've also, as Pilar had stated, that we have done things to try to mitigate the impact on the neighbor by reducing, eliminating stairs from the original design, because the appellant had expressed that people were going to be walking down that side of the property and into the ADU structure above, so we eliminated the stairs. We've eliminated windows. We've also, so that there's no light, he had a problem with light shining onto his property, and we had high windows. We eliminated those. We've eliminated windows looking out towards his property to try to give them a modicum of privacy. We've also set back the project over time. The project has been pushed further and further back, away from the setback. So we started the setback. If you look at the original garage, right now it is along the property line. We have moved that to angle so that it's facing the street, so that we, again, further from the neighbor. So we did not want to put it that way. We put it that way in order to try to appease the neighbor. So I feel that we've gone the extra mile, short of not doing the project, to appease the neighbor and to at least give them some modicum of privacy. So then also, if there are any missing information, I went through this checklist. I didn't see that there was missing information on the plans. It's all there. So I've even submitted a supplementary set to the city showing all how we have met all the requirements laid out in the city. We have moved the project forward. As all of you knew who were there yesterday, we have pushed the project back in order to have some parking. That is a major concern on La Cima. If you see that, if you put one car on the street, there is no way that two cars can pass. So we've trying to create off-street parking so that the 80 unit will have, though we're not required by state law to have a parking space for the 80 unit, we've created a space by pushing the building forward. I'm hoping that we can move forward with the project. It's been 3 years. The neighbors, the homeowners would like to settle this and move on. And you know, we've had staff approval, design review and approval, and I just think that we need to move on. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. You have reserved 14 minutes and 49 seconds. Are there questions for the applicant from council this time? Okay, there are not. We do have the member from the Single Family Design Review Board that is here that can speak, and what I'll do is have you address the council. Ms. Collins, I'll give you a little bit of latitude on your time since that testimony should have been before your thing. So if you would, please.
I apologize if I was late. I was looking for parking. Leslie Colas. I am a member of the Single Family Design Review Board, acting as vice chair currently. Mayor Rouse, council members. I'm here today to just kind of give you a general sense of what our board is looking for when we are reviewing projects of this nature. Obviously, we do our best to adhere to guidelines. This project, like many projects, often are trade-offs between what is for the better good versus what is great for a project or a parcel. This is a highly constrained parcel, as you know from your job site visit. And so we took that into consideration when we were looking at the project overall. I was not involved in the first two reviews of this project that preceded my membership on the board, but I was present for the last two reviews for PDA and final. My understanding, and in fact, I reviewed the video this morning from the October 21st, I think it was, hearing. And at that time, there was a question about whether we could actually move on the project and give it PDA. And there was clarification that occurred at that hearing with staff. And we were told, because the project had been revised at that time, and it didn't appear as though the description of the project reflected the revision of the project. So at that time, we requested clarification from staff as to whether we could actually give the project PDA. We did not, in fact, give it PDA. It was continued at that hearing, but staff did note that we did have the discretion to do that because the application had been deemed complete. So our board is not looking at an application for completeness, so to speak. We depend on staff for that. We have a limited amount of time as volunteers effectively to look at these projects and to review them and determine whether they meet guidelines. So there's a high level of dependency on staff on our part for completeness. So when they tell us it's complete, we're assuming that it has civil plans and it has grading plans and it has met these checklists that you've seen before you. So really what we're looking at is larger issues of privacy issues with neighbors. Have neighbors been brought into the process by the applicants? Has there been dialogue, or at least an attempt at dialogue? Sometimes there's an attempt, but there's no desire to reciprocate the dialogue, but at least that the applicants are doing that. We felt like that had happened. There was clearly responsiveness on the applicant's part to deal with some of the privacy issues that had been brought up, and I think the applicant addressed some of those issues, but some of the things that specifically we noted was that they removed all the fenestration that was on the west side of the project in order to reduce visual concerns as well as light emission that might cause problems for the appellant. The project was brought down in height, especially in the last iteration before it was given final approval, by about 18 inches. We felt like there was a benefit to the neighborhood in terms of the off-street parking. We all have concerns about high fire up there, accessibility for the fire department. We felt like any opportunity to gain some off-street parking for visitors was a positive thing. Didn't look like the parcel was being significantly affected, I will say, in terms of the movement of the mass of the garage and ADU. Although it was being pushed back, it wasn't down at the toe of the slope. It wasn't being moved beyond the, I guess that would be the northerly line of the existing residence. So we felt like there was precedent for that. We do not have purview over private views, so we don't get into those matters unless we are told that there is an active deed restriction or view that is actually memorialized in deeds between two parties. So we did not deal with that, but we did deal with the privacy issues. We felt like they had moved they did a good job moving back from the side yard setback. And trying to look at what else I have here. I was just looking back at the neighborhood preservation ordinance findings. And in looking at this real quickly, it seems like all of these were met based on my recollection of the hearing. And it appears as though we did condition the lighting to be night sky compliant. So although there was no lighting plan, we did put a condition on the approval to that regard. That's kind of the quick and dirty from my standpoint and my view. I'm happy to answer any questions if council has any further questions.
Other questions from council? Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse, and thank you for sharing with us the process. I have just some follow-up questions. So it was your understanding at the time that the application was deemed complete?
My understanding that was the application was deemed complete as part of the October hearing, and therefore the assumption on the board's part would have been that it was still complete when it came before us for the subsequent and final hearing.
And do you ever give design approval for a project that doesn't have a deemed complete application?
No, we are not permitted to do so by staff. Staff would say, hold on, put the brakes on, can't do that yet.
And if it's deemed complete and it's before you, to what extent are you looking at the grading plans in a hillside district? Is that something that you're taking into account?
I can only speak for myself, but I would typically look at what a net export is. I would look at the general impact to the site. Are they just affecting grading in the sort of immediate area of the disturbance, or is this moving beyond that to great extents? We would be looking at site sections, as the applicant noted, to make sure that they're reflecting what we think we're seeing in the grading plans.
Do you feel those were available to you at that October meeting?
I think they would have been, because if we had to, we could have gone back to staff and we could have asked for the previous iteration of civil plans. The footprint did not move significantly from the October to the March set of plans. So there would not have been a significant shift in civil engineering based on my professional experience and understanding of the project.
So even the building that would be moving further back onto the slope wouldn't affect cut and fill, or?
My understanding is it did not move further back from the October to the March.
Okay. And then just one more question about when you're balancing, you mentioned high fire and accessibility for fire response. How are you balancing that? So that created an extra parking space, but how are you balancing that with if it is pushed out onto the slope? So slope stability versus parking space created for fire accessibility. How do those balance?
I'm not looking at slope stability. I'm assuming that the applicant's civil engineer is doing that. That's their job.
Okay, so that'll be my.
So I'm looking at the broader impact of the project for the neighborhood as part of neighborhood preservation findings and compatibility findings.
Thank you. So when you see it and it's deemed complete, you're assuming that all of the grading issues have already been handled sufficiently for you to make your findings?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Gutierrez.
I would like staff, if possible, to address the concerns that the land use attorney mentioned about the information that was missing. If you can give an explanation of why that data was missing.
So in general, at least regarding the grading plan, it is true generally that we do require a grading plan when a project exceeds 250 cubic yards outside of the main building footprint. This was a little over 250. believe it was around approximately 280. And as the applicant noted, they did include some earthwork calculations and grading sections on the October 21 set. Unfortunately, that was not included in the March 22 set. But, as noted, the project didn't significantly change as far as it related to grading. They did change the orientation of the gable at that hearing, some fenestration in response to the board's comments. Regarding lighting, as Leslie noted, they did condition any future lighting to be night sky compliant. If there's any other specific items, happy to
The
address those.
Structure, they talked about information that a civil engineer would provide.
Sure.
And also my other question is where is that noted, all this information that you're giving me right now? Should that be noted? I understand that that information was given prior. Wouldn't it make sense to have that information included in recent documentations?
Yes, I would agree with that. They are required when they submit for building permit review, which is the next step after final approval by design review, to submit complete working drawings. So that would be included in that set. All structural engineering plans are required to be submitted at that point, and those would be reviewed for compliance as part of the building permit application to ensure that they still meet all the required requirements. Yeah.
So for the data on the structural, could you explain that information?
I might actually ask the architect to provide any specific comments related to the structural items. He might be able to provide a little bit more information on that.
So just to mention, we will probably go into council questions and deliberations once we get through the rebuttal and public comment, just so we can do it all together, because I'm sure all of us have those kind of questions, if that
fine.
works out.
Okay,
Thank you. For the appellant, did you have a rebuttal that you'd like to make, Ms. Collins? And like I said, I'll give you a little latitude, maybe a couple extra minutes, because we did have the testimony of the staff or the design review board after you got up.
Mayor Rouse, council members, yes, I do have a few things I wanted to speak to, both on the Vice Chair Colas's comments as well as staff's comments and, of course, the applicants. First, and this is a small but still material item on the lighting plan. Lighting plan tells you more than just night sky compliance. And by the way, that night sky compliance requirement is not in the minutes. Small detail, but still wanted to make sure I raised it. But bigger picture here, you just, I think, heard staff mention that we didn't have the grading plans. Yes, there was some grading information, but they're not the actual plans that back up the information that were shared at the October hearing about the October plan, and then things changed. It was a new plan for the March hearing, and they weren't included in there at all. So that's, the grading plans were missing. We also have not heard that the structural plans were there at all. Staff hasn't said that they were. The applicant has said nothing about the structural plans. And then also there's no mention of the height. There's no, yes, the architect said that the height's shown on there, but again, it's not shown with existing and proposed grade. And why is that important? Well, let's just go back to this slide here. Sorry, going all the way back. Here we go. So these are the 2019 plans. Again, when the garage was shoved all the way up, and you can see the house peeking out in the back, and you see the slope, and you see the structure. Right now, we have height as either it's 26 feet or it's 21 and something feet. It's not clear what. Those are the heights on the plans. And we have a 2019 plan. And then once it's shoved back on the slope, supposedly, you can still see the house in the back, and the slope hasn't changed at all. There's something wrong with these plans. We don't know the height of this building. There's a 30-foot height limit, and we don't even know if this needs a modification. It may. So you can see the house sticks out as it should on the side elevation here in the 2019 plans, and it's still sticking out. So there's something wrong. This whole 20 feet has been shoved back, so that does impact the height. So there is something wrong with these plans. We haven't had the architect explain what exactly is going on here. And, you know, we ask that this get addressed and the information be shared, and then it goes back to single-family design board so that they can make a decision. The applicant then will also be able to apply for a modification if they actually need a modification. I think there's a bit of a problem of social promotion here, you know, the kid that stays in 7th grade for a long time and finally gets brought up to 8th grade or 9th grade. Just to give you some history here, I have a little timeline at the very end. And Vice Chair Colas talked a little bit about that. She wasn't there for 2 of the hearings, and the reason for that is the first hearing was in July 2019. Then a year later, they came back for conceptual only, and then over a year later, they came back. In that time, the Single-Family Design Board had some changes between the second and the third. So I think that's part of what happened here. There's a bit of social promotion combined with fear over messing with an ADU. And also, you know, these are volunteers, they're relying on staff, you heard that, they're relying on staff, that the information's there. And so I haven't heard anything here from staff or the applicant demonstrating to you all that that information was actually here. In fact, I've heard the opposite. So based on that, we respectfully ask, and I understand you guys don't want to deal with single-family design board appeals. I don't want to be here on a single-family design board appeal. As much as I love you guys, I really don't want to have to appear on this, but I am asking that hopefully you all can see that there's something awry here and send this project back for consideration with a full, complete plan set and all the information. So with that, I will thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. And then for the applicant, do you have any else in their comments, Mr. Tracy?
Sure. I'd be more than happy to share with staff and with the appellant that these are the approved set of plans. There's a civil set of plans from 2021. As you can see in these plans, there is no, oh, sorry, my apologies. There is, I've met all requirements on the guideline checklist. We've been through the checklist 3 times now, and I'll be more than happy to share that the building is under the 30-foot height requirement. We have a full set of civil drawings that are reflective of the general footprint of what we have. Structural drawings are not required at this time. This is only design approval and planning approval. So grading, drainage, stormwater management, and structural are all required in the next phase of the project. So it's not necessary for staff to have that information. They've been provided with stormwater management. They've provided with civil drawings. They've also been provided with grading and drainage calculations. Structural is not part of this process right now. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, very good. Before we go to questions from council for staff, we'll go for public comment. Do we have anybody online with a public comment?
We do not.
And no speaker slips. Okay, very good. We'll go to council now. Mr. Jordan. And this is kind of questions and deliberations both, because I'm sure we all have all the above. So please go ahead.
I was just going to do questions. Is that okay?
Go right ahead.
All right. I think these are all for staff. I'm having trouble seeing streets on my map, but that location is in our designation of a coastal high fire hazard zone, right?
Through the mayor, thank you, council member. Yes, it's in the coastal high fire area.
And then according to the current ordinance or law, is an off-street parking space for an ADU required?
No parking was required for the accessory dwelling units within a half-mile of public transit.
Okay. And then I want to confirm what I heard earlier, that private views are not part of the compatibility findings.
Private views are not protected, no.
Okay.
There, I will say, within the guidelines, there's a tip to consider private views of neighbors, but again, it's not formally protected.
Okay. And then much was made of those design guidelines checklists. And I just want to make sure that I'm reading these right. I never got one of these on the Planning Commission, by the way. It was just make it up as you go along. But the two guideline forms I looked at, the hillside and the single-family development, the preamble clearly lists these as tools to be used. They're not a qualifier or a not qualifier, non-qualifier, and actually states that the language that's used in there that would call something encouraged or discouraged is not mandatory. So these aren't a checklist to make you qualified to meet something. They're purely so this is my question, they are a tool to be used as you go through the process to come to a decision. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And then, so I'm sorry, didn't follow your name, and I'm trying to avoid just calling you by your first name, from the Single Family Design Board. If I had another question for you, and we made you sit down. So I'm unsure when you came in between the second and the third, if this had already been discussed, but I was interested I'm interested in the discussion item of actually making it a point to push the garage back 20 feet rather than build in the existing envelope of where the garage is now. And the weighing of that decision, looking at that, I was on that street, been on the street twice. So, and the weighing of that decision relative to the high fire hazard area, two cars can't go by the street at the same time, and so pushing it back with the height going back further in the lot versus leaving it at the front but not having any off-street parking at all. Could you talk a little bit more about how that decision was reached or discussed?
Sure.
Okay.
The last name's Colas. It always gets
Thank you.
everybody confused. It's French. Everybody thinks it's Italian. Half the time they call me Colossi. Just as a point of record, I'd like to note that between the second and the third hearing, as part of our requirements as board members, staff requires that we go back and look at the previous videos, documents, and minutes and acclimate ourselves to the projects before we weigh in on a subsequent meeting for any project. So that was done. I did do that before the third hearing that I participated in. I just want to make that clear to everybody. In terms of the decision to push the development back away from the front property line, that was a decision that was made by the applicant. It was not the recommendation of the board. It was not something that we mandated or suggested. That was a design decision, as I understood it, from the applicant. So what we were doing is simply looking at that and weighing the guidelines versus what was presented in front of us. We could have said, alternatively, we could have said, no, you need to keep this right up against the street, and you're going to have to pursue a modification. From my perspective, I would rarely make a recommendation on the board that would mandate that an applicant go through a modification process. That creates a hardship on them. So I typically wouldn't do that. It was their decision to move it back, and so we were simply looking at it and going, okay, what are the effects of them doing this on this architecturally, on the neighborhood, relative to slope? These were the things that we were taking into consideration. It did not increase the overall height relative to the neighboring property by them pushing it back. It may have increased the overall height relative to grade, but it did not increase the overall height of the structure itself relative to the westerly property. So that was somewhat of a non-issue. There was clearly a benefit to the neighborhood in terms of having the off-street parking. So I did take that into consideration personally, and I would imagine the other board members did. Based on my review of the video, I think there were other board members that did make comments that they felt that that was a benefit for the neighborhood as well.
Super. Thank you so much.
Yes.
And then, just so I'm clear too, from staff, if you have a garage footprint that's legal non-conforming with a front setback, but you're talking about an ADU on top of that, you wouldn't have to get a modification to rebuild the garage with the ADU on top of it, would you?
Actually, and thank you for the question. So the ordinance allows for the reconstruction of a non-conforming garage relative to its existing setback, but the ADU would need to meet whatever setbacks are applicable for the zone. They are allowed some relief with the 4-foot setback for ADUs for the interior, but they would still need to meet the required front setback.
20
And-
feet.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it'd be like an ADU hanging in air behind the garage, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that wouldn't work, would it? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. I just first need to get really clear on this deemed complete issue. I'm not really comfortable with either side holding up a piece of paper and saying, this is highlighted yellow and it's not complete, and here are some rolled up plans and these are complete, and how do I know? And so I want to know from you, on those checklists, I want specifically to know about grading, drainage, stormwater management, but particularly the grading plan. And I'll preface it by saying that it is a little hot button topic for me, because I spent 3 years on this grading ordinance and seeing, particularly when ADUs were coming into the hillsides, how the grading became a huge issue. And we spent a lot of time implementing new ordinances. And I mean, these guidelines on hillsides are more than guidelines. It's so when I hear generally required grading at 280 cubic feet, but then, we're maybe 50 over that or not. I mean, I know people who count it to the bucket of, cut and fill, because it makes a really significant impact. So I need to understand on that checklist and the deemed complete, was everything there or was everything not there?
So thank you for the question. Just to clarify, so the completeness review is relative to the Permit Streamlining Act. We're required when an application is submitted to the city to review the plans to make sure it is complying with all applicable ordinances. So, for example, for zoning review, they would be checking height, they would be checking compliance with the solar height limitations. For stormwater, projects that include new impervious area would be routed to creeks. This particular project was reviewed by our Creeks Division for Tier 3 stormwater compliance, and was deemed, as I said previously, for final approval, that they had the appropriate information. Regarding grading, the trigger for that is 250 cubic yards, and as I mentioned, they're slightly over, and that wasn't included in the final approval set, so that is accurate. That was included in the final approval set.
It was or it was not?
It was not in the final approval set from March 14th. There was information on the October 21 set relative to the earthwork calculations, and again, in terms of the board's purview and what they're looking at, if they do not feel there is adequate information presented on the plans in order for them to make the findings, and they do have specific findings about grading, if that information isn't presented, they can request additional information from staff or from the architect.
Okay, this is not directed at you. I have maybe some questions for Mr. Kalan about, help me out here. We made such a huge deal of this grading issue, like such a big deal of it. And it was one of the biggest issues I've ever pushed on council. And I've heard only more about grading, only issue more is fire. So we did all that. We had big, very careful calculations about the grading. I'm having I don't know, not understanding what I'm hearing, that something could get to the point of having approval without a grading plan.
I'm going to defer to staff, but what I understand them to be saying is that the single-family design board's purview doesn't directly mandate that kind of information, whether that's appropriate.
So whose purview does? Whose purview does? How does, where's the gatekeeper for that?
The building official is what I believe is the right answer, but I'll defer to staff.
I think Ms. Brooke is ready to weigh in on that point.
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Seddon. I do want to back up just a little bit to your first question about project being deemed complete and what's terminology that's being used today about the final checklist, the checklist. So I think part of what's adding to that confusion is that on the date that SFDB approved this project, they found they granted project design approval and final approval in the same hearing. So we ensure that projects are deemed complete for the purposes of making sure they have enough information to present to the design board before we schedule them for project design approval. That's the major milestone in a project. They were also granted final approval on the same day. That's the final approval checklist where it gets into more details, colors, materials, that type of thing. I think the grading threshold that you're referring to in the grading ordinance that we updated maybe a year or two ago was specific to triggers for building permit.
It was specific to ADUs
For
on
ministerial
hillsides in
projects,
high
right.
fire areas. It was exactly this circumstance. I'm having a really hard time understanding how it is that something gets called deemed complete without a grading plan in the hillside.
Councilmember Seddon, I believe that reference to the grading ordinance is with respect to ministerial projects, because we were seeing ADUs being proposed in hillside districts where we had no discretionary review, so they did not go to the single-family design board, and there were questions called out about how much grading occurred on those sites, and that's when we made the 50 cubic yard threshold. But if the plans say 40 cubic yards, then you need to have some other further data to indicate that it does not go bid 50. So it's a slightly different issue that we're talking about in terms of the grading plan required for this
Then I might need another
stage.
3-year process to make it be what I actually want it to be, and what I thought we understood it to be is that we're not getting to deemed complete on hillsides with grading issues above 30% slope, not even 15% slope, much less 30% slope, where then something just slips through, is deemed complete and done and approved, and then later people are saying, wait a minute, there was more grading done here. Mr. Klunk, can you help me with when appeals used to go to the fire code and safety when it had to do with grading, and that was part of our change as well, was to have more control over this. Can you somehow help me understand why we're here hearing about grading issues when something's deemed complete? I'm truly not understanding.
I'm going to apologize. I can't give you any precise advice on that. I'd be happy to come back with that if you want to continue this hearing.
Okay. Then I have further questions too about, so in the design guidelines, there's grading and driveways, and there's guidelines about not stepping back driveways, minimizing the length of driveways. That didn't seem to be looked at either. Yeah.
Mr. Isaacson, looks like he's ready to weigh in for us.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Snen. I just wanted to make sure we are drawing a distinction between design review board approval and building permit issuance and approval. So the grading plans that you're referencing are not part of the aesthetic review, but would be required to get a building permit for the project. And that's when we would be looking at the grading plan for all the items you're mentioning in terms of securing the hillside and protecting the slope. So I just want to make sure we are clear on the distinction between the two and the different levels of review that we require at different stages of the project.
So then to the appellant's sort of case that those weren't included in the plans, is your expectation that they would be in the plans before they got to that point?
They would most definitely be in the plans before the Community Development Department would issue a construction permit for this project.
Would you expect that they were in the plans before they went to single-family design review?
I'll defer to staff for an answer on that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilmember Snedden. So generally, yes, they are included as part of the final approval set. As Ms. Plummer had mentioned, they were in the October, the initial request for project design approval that wasn't originally granted. They weren't included in the February or the subsequent March hearing of 2022. Generally, as Vice Chair Klaas mentioned, there wasn't significant change in the grading amount. We don't have those plans. That's very clear that that wasn't part of that set. But what the Single-Family Design Board is tasked to do is that they need to have enough information that they can make their findings. And so they felt, the Single-Family Design Board felt confident enough based on their motion that they had enough information. And when they don't feel like they have enough information, they can instruct staff to say, or tell the applicant, we don't have enough information to approve a project. We are missing this, or sometimes it'll come up without a landscape plan, for instance, or when they can't make the findings. So to a certain extent, we try not to overburden an applicant because we do put them through a rigorous application completeness process where each of our different departments and divisions review the process. This one, I think, went through 3 rounds of review. And then we schedule it at hearings, so oftentimes it's a long time before they can get to a public hearing. And then once we have enough information to do not only our environmental review, but make sure that it meets all the ordinance, that it's not triggering any other kind of land use approval, then we are able to schedule it for project design approval. And that's when after it's deemed complete for permit streamlining. Now again, the Single-Family Design Board it's in their discretion if they don't have enough information that they can go back and say, we're not going to do this, we'd like to have more information. And that was not the case in March.
And we also heard that they maybe assume that those have already been looked at, and that there is a plan and it's been deemed complete, and now they're just looking at design. So
correct, and that's Councilmember Snedden, yes, there is a reliance on staff that we've done a thorough review, that we've checked all the boxes, and certainly for the applicant's sake, we want to avoid any kind of missteps, because by the time they get to the building permit process, if there is any discrepancy, in some cases they might have to go back to the Single-Family Design Board, and we want to avoid that at all costs, because again, that adds a lot of time and frustration to applicants. So we try to do as much as we can, and then we also know that this project will be, once the building permit application is submitted, we'll be doing a thorough review of that as well. So again, that will be rerouted to all the same departments and divisions that have already reviewed the plans, and we'll be looking against the code to see how that matches.
thank you. And then to what extent, in the guidelines, you have grading for driveways, you have downstepping, there's also the architectural features, but natural surroundings. To what extent is the Single-Family Design Board instructed to use these guidelines in all of the decisions? It seems like some of them were really paid attention to, and then some, not so much.
Thank you, council members. Then I can try to answer that question. So in general, the guidelines are a tool for the decision makers. It's not, as previously mentioned, a checklist that you go through each guideline that could potentially be applicable and make sure it meets every single one. It's a balancing of the guidelines. One of the guidelines talks about specifically for steep slope lots to balance grading with buildings closer to the street. So it is the Single-Family Design Board's purview to look at a project, look at any site constraints, and to try to go through the guidelines and to make sure that they feel it is appropriate with the guidelines as well as applicable to their findings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. Most of my questions were answered. I just had a clarifying question in regards to the ADU law on no parking within a half a mile. this street is pretty far up, so is it within a half a mile of public transportation? Did we verify that?
Yes, that's correct. We do have an overlay for the city that shows properties that are within a half-mile of public transit, and this particular property did fall within that. It was also reviewed by transportation to confirm it would complied with that. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make sure, I'm going to ask a couple of clarifying questions following up from Councilmember Sneddon, just to make sure that my understanding is correct. I think, Mr. Isaacson, you laid it out for us, but I want to make sure that I'm following sort of the process here. So it seems to me that though grading plans are typically included before you issue deemed complete, they're not required to be included vis-a-vis the consideration at Single Family Design Board. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
So for project design approval, typically we're looking at grading where applicable, but for the final plans that should be included, it should be color and material samples, cut sheets, exterior details, including windows, doors, eaves, final landscape plans, stormwater management plan components, irrigation plan components as applicable, and that's what's included as part of the final approval noted in our guidelines.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you. So I guess I'm just trying to get a simple, so it's relevant, if I'm understanding you correctly, but not dispositive to issuing a deemed complete decision?
That's
whether
correct.
or not we have, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then secondarily, with regard to the grading on this particular project, to the extent the grading plan comes back and we do have issue with it, or there is issue under the ordinance, that will be addressed at a later phase when they go for construction permit or building permit. Is that what I understand Mr. Isaacson to have said?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, very good. It seems like a lot of our questions and deliberations are about process more than the project itself, so I'm glad we got some of that clarified. We'll move into council deliberations now, if there are no further questions or comments. So, Mr. Jordan?
I'll lead the way. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what strikes me about this location, of course, is the kind of the domino parcels running down through that corridor before you get to the view. And this is specifically, of course, one reason why we don't mess around with private views, because there's a zillion of them in this city. I think the process as laid out by the city has done exactly what it's supposed to do. This went through 4 hearings. I look back at the minutes, and to 4 hearings, the project was moved on with votes of 7-0, 5-0, 5-1, 5-0, and the last one was 6-0. I don't see how any reasonable person could start to think that there was a lot of indecision in any of those decisions by those numbers. It's clear for me that the Single Family Design Board did what they're supposed to do. You know, they specifically addressed the compatibility with the 2-story element being compatible with the neighborhood in addition to the size, bulk, and scale. I'm even more satisfied after I asked the question on the issue of having off-street parking versus not. It's clear to me that Single Family Design Board looked more at design and compatibility with the neighborhood rather than just getting cars off the street. I thought it was much more cars off the street in a high fire zone. So I'm happy to hear that that wasn't just it. And the Single Family Design Board clearly made the findings that it met the neighborhood preservation ordinance criteria, which is a strict list of findings to make, not a checklist of guidelines, which is not a checklist of requirements. So I'm going to be of the opinion that I would affirm the Single Family Design Board findings and deny the appeal.
Thank you. Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse, and I would be supporting the project going back to single-family design board with the additional grading plans. And I will agree that there was something wrong with that drawing, with something being pushed back, but still being able to see the building beyond it. So I'm not sure that those plans are accurately reflective, or that single-family design board had the understanding of what they didn't have before them, because some things that were at the October meeting that weren't at the subsequent meetings, and I would be far more comfortable having it go back for review.
Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. I am in concurrence with Councilmember Jordan, and having gone on the site visit, I looked around the neighborhood as well, in addition to the findings that the single-family design made. And one of the issues, I think, is by pushing it back, and the fact that the ADU didn't require a parking space, that could be problematic in that neighborhood. But overall, I do understand the issue with the grading, and it is an issue I think that we need as a council to better understand that through a different process, because from my understanding today is that the grading will be addressed through the building department, and that wasn't necessarily the purview of the single-family design board. And so while I understand where the neighbors are coming from, I don't think at this point, after having the multiple hearings and the single-family design board having a 6-0 vote on it, that pushing it back another is going to achieve a different result. It might provide additional information, but that information will be provided subsequently with the building permit. So with that, I'm where Councilmember Jordan is.
Ms. Harmon?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I guess I should start by acknowledging that I find these appeals always very challenging, and understanding the real sensitivity of these issues. It's your home, and I very much respect all parties here, and so I want to just acknowledge that starting off, and say very respectfully, I am going to agree with Councilmember Friedman and Jordan on this today. I just don't see a process failure here in the way that our process is laid out. I agree with Mr. Friedman that there may be something here for us to look at as a council with regard to whether the grading plan must, as a requirement, be included when the single-family design board makes their assessment, but I'm not hearing anything here that requires that to be a specific finding made from them. And instead, I actually am hearing from our single-family design board representative that well, they've done pretty much exactly what we've asked them to do, which is to look at aesthetics and compatibility, and have stayed, as we are so often asking them to do, very squarely within their specific purview, and not moving beyond into what other departments, other boards, or other staff members are tasked to do. So with that, I do want to highlight there is an opportunity, as our staff has said, for this issue to be brought forth if it really is one that needs to be remedied. And I hope that moving forward, we can have additional conversation to clarify this issue so no one finds themselves here again. So with that, my appreciation for everyone taking the time to be here today, and I will be voting with Council Members Jordan and Friedman. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, very good. If there are no further comments, we'll go to a motion. I feel that we've gone through we've covered some ground on process, but I think the compelling issue here was one of views which we don't control. So I think that I'm going to also be denying the appeal as well. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to uphold the single-family design board's approval, deny the appeal, and make the findings, adopt those findings also made by the single-family design board.
Moved by Jordan.
I'll second it.
Second by Friedman. Ms. Clerk, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Councilmember Friedman.
Yes.
Councilmember Sneddon.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Harmon.
Yes.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan.
Yes.
Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez.
No.
And Mayor Rouse.
Aye. All right, very good. And with that, we have interviews coming up for our advisory groups, and that's a time specific 4 o'clock. Let's take a 10-minute break. We'll give our translators a break, and move on from there. read the next item.
Yes, item 14, interviews for city advisory groups.
All right, very good. Thank you all for coming. We're going to do interviews. We'll do them alphabetically by committee, 3 minutes per interview per speaker. If you're interviewing for more than one, or if you're applying for more than one committee, you can do it all at once and have up to 5 minutes. So you can let us know when you get up here. And we will start with the Arts Advisory Committee. Anybody here for that? We have one, very good. And if you'd state your name and go from there.
My name is Claudia Scow.
I'm sorry, say it one more time.
Claudia Scow.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. In the past, we've had a sort of tally sheet of all of the applicants' names with headers on the sections. I'm wondering if we
It
have
should be
any.
in your packet, in the agenda packet with the last attachment.
In the back?
In the back?
It's an attachment, so it's one of the attachments to the agenda.
Oh.
Ah, thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, thanks for your patience. And Scal, if you go right ahead.
Okay. Should I just start by answering the general questions?
You can do it everywhere you want. There's a little timer right there to let you know what your time is too.
Okay. Well, prior to relocating to Santa Barbara 3 years ago, I served as a founding board member for Friends of Bixby Park in Long Beach for 12 years. The board worked closely with the city as well as 3 neighborhood associations whose residents utilized the park. Bixby Park had fallen onto hard times in the early 2000s. There was gang activity and drug activity at the park, and there was petty crime, and residents felt unsafe. So when the city had lost its budget for park rangers, they encouraged our board to get creative with our public safety efforts. So as part of this board, we worked with the city and neighborhood associations and the Long Beach Neighborhood Foundation to hold fundraisers to pay for family-friendly programs at the park. And one of them was Art in Bixby Park. And through my work in this program, I developed a strong interest in promoting public works of art and raising awareness of local artists. And so when I saw that this position was open on the advisory committee, and now that I live here in Santa Barbara, I'd like to bring my experience working with the city and my neighborhood associations to, just for the goal of enriching the lives of our communities.
All right, very good. Thank you. Do you have any questions, Michelle? Kristen?
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. And thank you for application. Just a question about how you see the role of the Arts Committee and equity. We've recently had more
Sure.
attention there.
Well, I should mention that, to answer that question directly, I feel that public art is the heart of Santa Barbara, our cultural identity, and it's a representation of our culturally diverse community. It promotes civic pride, fosters curiosity and creativity among the residents, and especially young people, and it enriches the lives of our community. I think it's important to mention that over the past few months, I've volunteered for Santa Barbara Museum of Art's Museum Collectors Council, and I've had the pleasure of speaking with Miss Sarah York Rubin, who's part of the arts, and in seeking her recommendation of how to put together a walking tour of downtown murals. And right now, there isn't a public resource or a map that is available to the public. And so if I were elected to this advisory committee, I would relish the opportunity to work with Ms. Rubin to create public resources that will encourage the exploration of Santa Barbara's public art scene.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Gutierrez, you have a question?
You briefly explained your participation in a particular park in Long Beach and how you basically helped to bring it back to the community. Here in Santa Barbara, we are struggling with a similar issue, especially in my district, to bring safety and open it up to the community. Could you give us examples of, now that you're here in Santa Barbara, how the community and the city can come together and have, that park become safer, working with law enforcement, with community members, and making that place somewhere where children can go and play and feel safe?
Absolutely. I feel like when I was serving on the board of Friends of Bixby Park, we really had a unique opportunity to work with the city and invite them to our meetings, and they could hear our feedback and our concerns about public safety. And because of those budget cuts, they really forced us to think outside of the box with our fundraising for public safety. So the programs like Art in Bixby Park, where the artists paid $50 each to display their wares, and we had up to 50 artists. We took those funds and we put them directly back into park programming and park improvements. The programming that we used for Jazz in the Park, Shakespeare in the Park, Free Family Skate Night, and Bob Baker Marionettes, those events brought people to the park, and as a result, it pushed out some of the illegal activity, and over those years, we saw illegal activity and petty crime decrease, I feel, as a result of the community taking back the park.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anyone else for the Arts Advisory Committee? Okay, we'll move to Building and Fire Code Board of Appeals. Anyone for that? Looks like we have a winner.
Thank you. My name's Elizabeth Sorgman. I brought some reading information because I thought it was going to take a long time to come speak. Again, my name's Elizabeth Sorgman, and I'm really honored to be here and to toss my name into the hat of possible candidates for this board. I was born and raised in Santa Barbara, and I have attended all our local schools, Franklin School, Our Lady of Guadalupe, Bishop Diego, Santa Barbara High School, and I'm a graduate of Cal Poly San Luis Obispo with a degree in architecture. I grew up on Noble Street, and in 1965, my parents bought a house on Loma Street, and so I have lived there ever since, and I have the good fortune of being able to say that my kids live in the same house that I was raised in. So our family has always been active in all kinds of community activities. I have served on every board position in PTAs at every school that my kids attended: Roosevelt, Washington, Santa Barbara Junior High, Santa Barbara High School. And I was on the steering committee for Kids World, for the Rebuild Roosevelt, the Major Luke Theater at Santa Barbara Junior High, and just all kinds of civic projects. I am still on the board of AYSO, and it's part of our vocabulary to volunteer time, so I definitely have time to give time to this board. I have been in private practice, self-employed for about 25, 30 years. I also work for the County of Santa Barbara and the City of Santa Barbara, and so I'm well aware of what is required. I have been in construction since the 1980s, so I know all the different issues that come about from the private side and also from the other side. And so I love my job. I love the opportunity to do this kind of work. The reason I mentioned all of these boards is not to brag about anything, but because one of the things that I took away from being on these boards is a really good understanding of Robert's Rules of Order. I think I have one of those books in my library still. But also the reality of working on a board, having to work in collaboration, having to reach consensus, realizing that this is not my decision, but a collaborative group. Some of the most exciting projects that we worked on, again, Kids World, where there's all of these different communities that came together to come and solve a problem. And so I see that as an attribute. I'm great at kind of seeing the global picture and then trying to be fair, listen, because that's really key, listening. And that's what I think I accomplished on a lot of the boards that I sat on. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Any question for Ms. Horton? Ms. Sneddon?
I think I might have a question for staff, that the category that the vacancies are in are under members of physically handicapped community. Is that correct?
I didn't knock that one, I don't think.
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sutton, I'm going to have to defer to the clerk to answer that, hopefully.
Yes, sorry, that was a oversight. That should be two separate categories.
And so Ms. Sorgman then would be in
It's a city resident member.
city resident.
City
member.
resident, yes.
Okay, thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
for the clarification. All right, very good. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else for the Building and Fire Code Board of Appeals? We'll move to the Central Coast Commission for Senior Citizens. All righty, go for the next one. Citizens Oversight Committee.
My name's Eric Grossman. I actually applied to 3 committees, but one of which was the Citizens Oversight Committee. The other 2 are the Rental Housing Mediation Board and the Community Development Human Services Committee. So I am a pediatric surgeon. I work at Cottage Hospital. I also have my master's degree in healthcare administration as well as clinical and medical ethics. I have a real passion for problem solving and specifically with intention of kind of helping all individuals. In my current career, it's mostly children, but I'm really passionate about making things better. I like to make them better on an individual level, and I get a lot of professional satisfaction in taking care of children. But I also like to get them better in a systems standpoint. I'm currently the medical director of our multi-specialty pediatrics group, and I'm working with our hospital administration to kind of improve the delivery of care. The reason why I'm extremely interested in serving on these committees is because I think it speaks very much to my desire to understand processes, improve them, and provide the most good to individuals with the limitations that are built into the system. So whatever our resources are, whatever our budget is, I'm really excited about understanding the problem, understanding how we can achieve the most good with what we have available, and then designing a solution to achieve that. To be completely frank, I think the Community Development and Human Services Committee is where I'm most excited about participating. I think I could do the most good in helping to understand how to best distribute funds to affect, I was very impressed with this phrase, slums and blight. But I think the concept of overall improvement of the community with understanding that it involves working with people, working with systems, and working with built-in constraints to try to achieve a solution is definitely something I'd like to participate in.
All right, very good. Thank you. Ms. Sneddon. Oh, you don't, okay. Oh, do you have a question?
Yeah, very quickly, sorry, thank you. So I just want to confirm, thank you for application. So under Community Development and Human Services, that would be your first choice?
Yes, please.
And then you satisfy the Business Community Economic Development category?
Yeah, my wife and I own a private practice.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much for your
Mr.
time.
Friedman. Mr. Grossman?
Actually, no, I think my question was answered.
Oh.
I think I'm good, thank you.
We got you both times. All right, very good. Anyone else for the Citizens Oversight Committee?
Citizens Oversight Committee for Measure C. That's what I'm applying for. Frank Peters. Got the right category?
Yes, it is.
I didn't think I was going to be here today. I said goodbye to everybody on the Measure C committee, but then I got an email from the clerk inviting any of us who were going to be missing the involvement with the committee to consider coming back. So here I am. You know, when I first got involved with the Measure C committee, I didn't know what I was doing, of course, or what I was in for. But I knew one thing, the committee was only going to meet once a year. And what could be so bad about that? And what do you know, at the first meeting, we gather and decide to meet quarterly. So that was something I had to get used to. Now, some of my colleagues on the committee, I don't think they knew what they were getting into either, because some of them brought a little bit of like an audit mentality to our meetings and would ask very pointed questions of city staff. But as you know, dealing with city staff, or my experience certainly is, it's hard to trip them up. I never found a penny that was, in the wrong column. And instead, I think for myself, what happened to me was I became an evangelist for getting rid of potholes and using the money for its intended purpose. And I would, after a meeting, there'd be opportunities for me to talk to my friends and colleagues and neighbors and share with them what's going on. So I'm really, what am I doing here right now? I'm pitching participating in the Measure C committee. Now, back to that very first meeting, I don't mind telling you, I raised my hand and says, I think I should be chairman of the committee. Well, I didn't have the votes, and it took me 3 years to become vice chair of the committee. So then I surprised my colleagues on the committee by stepping down from that position at the very next meeting. And why did I do that? I was looking for an opportunity. I think this is a kind of committee, the Citizens Oversight Committee for Measure C, the perfect incubator for those maybe junior members or people without a lot of government experience to engage with this committee, learn how meetings operate, and learn basically everything about city streets and the East Beach improvements, the improvements coming to the library. Anyway, I stepped down, and a younger person got elevated to vice chair, and then at our meeting after that, he stepped up to chair of the committee. So
We actually are out of time and need to wrap up. Mr. Freeman does have a question for you.
yes, sir.
I just want to clarify, because on the chart it says that you're not an incumbent. Are you currently serving on the committee?
Yes.
Okay. So in the information that's presented to us, it doesn't mention incumbent dates served, so if we could just clarify that for the appointment in the staff report.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you. That's the question I had, just a technical
Sure.
question.
Technicalities. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Anybody else for the Citizens Oversight Committee? We'll go to the Civil Service Commission. Nobody for that? Okay. Community Development and Human Services Committee. Come on up, please.
I'm one of these people that's looking into 3 different committees, so I will do my best in your 3 to 5 minutes to help with
Okay.
that. I'm Dr. Bob Permit. I'm the retired physician, executive, and psychiatrist. I practiced at what was then the Santa Barbara Medical Foundation Clinic for 7 years. My
And
wife.
what are the committees you're
I'm sorry, thank you. Community Development, Living Wage Advisory Committee, and the Rental Housing. And I can tell you the criteria, I guess, that I thought I fulfilled for that. I'm a qualified elector in the city. I'm a senior. And I am a homeowner, I was a tenant, and I was a landlord. So I
Okay, well, you
thought-
can give it all at once. Go right ahead.
Dr. Bob Permit, P-E-R-M-U-T. First of all, some kudos to Nico Lopez, because I was having some trouble with the application process, and after some calls and some emails back and forth, we got where we needed to go. So many times staff don't get kudos, so I wanted to thank him. As I said, I was a practicing psychiatrist here in town, and my wife actually worked at Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital in outpatient surgery. So both of our daughters, who are now 42 and 37, were born here. Before I went off on my career, which ended up being in healthcare administration, management, and leadership. So I've had a lot of experience with, been the CEO of a large multi-specialty group practice in Chicago in the inner city. I've been a chief medical officer of a 12-hospital system in Chicago and Philadelphia. So I've been around the country doing lots of leadership, administrative, and things along the way, obviously committed to patient care, committed to the citizens of the community, having to devote time to them. Since moving back here, well, I would say about 10 years ago, actually, we thought we'd be moving back. When I was thinking about retirement, we bought a condo, ended up leasing it, didn't come back then, but came back about 4 years ago. And since then, we live in the Hope Village area, and I've become particularly interested in the homeless problem. I've been involved with the ACT committee and on the Zoom calls, and have done some community walks with Mr. Friedman, among others. So I decided it was time for me to say, okay, there's more to life than just sitting at home and reading and whatever. I should really involve myself in the community more. So these three things I thought fit me pretty well. Obviously, I've been involved before with assessing grants, giving grants, both, and evaluating meaningfulness of people following through in the quality of services. And so I think that's one of the reasons I thought the Community Development and Human Services Committee, particularly with my mental health background, might be of interest. In terms of the Living Wage Advisory Committee, again, as I've been a tenant, a landlord, and a resident, a homeowner, and I was taking a look at the pricing of apartments in the area, $2,500 to $4,500 a month, and thinking, okay, if we're contracting with people to provide services, we ought to help them live here too. And finally, in terms of the mediation board, I've not had true mediation training, but I certainly have had a lot of negotiation training, both in terms of workshops as well as practical experience, and really think that you know, the idea of equity and fairness and whatever we do is important. And I know I've run really fast through all that. And my wife said, got to slow down. And I said, you know, I used to present before thousands of people at national conferences, but I haven't been in front of a group like you for a little while. So I'd like, you know, I'd be happy to have you ask me any questions about where I fit in any of these groups, because I think I have value to add with my background.
Thank you. Ms. Gutierrez.
For the Community Development and Human Resource Committee, you'll be looking over a pot of money that comes directly from the state to distribute to our local nonprofits.
Right.
As you know, the city of Santa Barbara has a lot of nonprofits that they compete every year for the same amount of money. And I actually served on that committee. I would like to ask you, what are some questions that you would ask the nonprofit development directors, the coordinators, the management, the leadership in those nonprofits, and to make sure that that money is being utilized, that it goes directly to the community?
Right, yeah. Very important. It's the same assessment I make when I give money to charities, actually, myself personally. You know, like, how much is for marketing? You know, how much is for executive salaries? How much is really going for the services that we're really wanting to support? So when you start to ask people about how they allocate their own resources that they might get from a grant, it goes back to the same kind of thing. And many times people actually need more money. We all need more money. But people might sit there and say, okay, staffing, you know, we've done this with staffing. We need X number of social workers. We need X number of care workers, and we only have Y. And how we go about doing that, and they might be very creative. We have some part-time people that end up being more than one FTE, and you know, we get some people who are willing to volunteer and go through training to help us get those things. And so you begin to prod a little further about how is it that you can really expand the scope of services and not just totally get hung up on that dollar amount, although it's obviously very important. And then it's really a matter, I'm a big, as a prior physician who was here, I'm big on quality and measurement. So you need to measure the outcome. So it's a matter about what's the impact of what you've done in the past. You've come here before. Tell us about, you know, how many people have you kept out of the hospital, or how many people have you aided in getting off of welfare if that's one of your issues, or how many people have you helped out of the homeless region, whatever those issues are that they might be applying for, and begin to look at some metrics and sit there and say, what's your performance like, and what's that going to look like going forward. So those would be just a few of the things that I might try to ask people.
Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else for the Community Development and Human Services Committee? Move on to the Fire and Police Commission. Come on up.
Okay, my name is Marcus Chevatrisi, and I applied to the Police and Fire Commission a few months ago. Recently received an email from Nicholas saying that my application was still valid, so I showed up today. So thank you for considering my application. I've lived in Santa Barbara for about 25 years. I have a family. We live on the Mesa. I'm an engineer by trade, and I want to give back to this community that's been very good to me. So I would like to volunteer and help and contribute. Interested in how technology can be used to help our law enforcement and our citizens be safer. Yeah, that's basically, I've run teams, managed budgets. I have lots of professional experience in the corporate world. I think that I can help and contribute here in an impactful manner.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Ms. Ned?
Thank you, Mayor Rouse, and it's perfectly okay if you don't have an opinion on this. I just am interested. There's been some discussion about expanded role of Fire and Police Commission to possibly be including some element of police oversight, and what were your thoughts? Would your thoughts be on that? And again, perfectly all right if you don't have an opinion on that, since it isn't formally formed.
I'd be, happy to do it. I think I don't know what how much power that oversight would have, but I do have opinions, and I'm happy to share them. And so depending on which, if it's a financial oversight or a procedural oversight, I think that there's lots that the police and fire department do. They do well. We could always do better, and just being pragmatic and looking at how to make things better is a good thing.
Thank you.
Ms. Gutierrez?
So you currently had served on this commission?
No, I applied. There was a vacancy. It wasn't filled about a few months ago, and I saw a notice and I applied to it. And then at that time I was very busy with the work I was doing, so I didn't follow through with the whole application process. And at this point in time, I have more time to do it, so I decided to do it.
So you mentioned about technology being used in law enforcement and how that's an area that you would like to explore. Recently, our local police department received body cameras. Have you talked to people in the police department to see maybe where they can grow in their area of technology, or do you have some ideas that you would like this department to have?
Well, it's interesting you ask about cameras, because my background is building cameras and sensors. So that's an area I understand very well, and network sensors and that type of technology. I'm actually interested in volunteering to understand more about how that problem is being addressed, and how to improve the technologies to, not just record what's going on, but actually make the engagement to the police officers have safer for the police officers and for the citizens they're talking to. And there's things that you can do with sensors that, may not be available today yet.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, very good. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Let's see, anybody else for Fire and Police Commission? Historic Landmarks Commission? Housing Authority Commission? Come on, please.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and Council members. My name is Lucille Boss, and in my first and current term as a Commissioner of the Housing Authority of the City of Santa Barbara, I've enjoyed a lot of opportunities to learn about and advocate for affordable housing, for services, and other opportunities to promote resident self-sufficiency. I'm before you as an applicant for a second term for the Housing Authority Commission. I currently serve as chair of our local Housing Authority Commission, vice president of Commissioner Affairs on the Pacific Southwest Regional Council, and as chair of the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials Commissioners. I also have both personal and professional expertise in housing policy. 10 years ago, after several years on the waiting list, I was fortunate to have an opportunity to own my own home through this city's affordable housing program. And I can't begin to tell you what that has meant for stability in my own life. At the time, I worked for our local education office, connecting students and their families with community resources and support systems. I moved on to our community college foundation a few years later and guided college students through housing and food insecurity challenges while making sure that they had access to a high quality and affordable college education. That work has led me to my current role with our county's homeless services. I've juggled state and federal funding administration throughout COVID-19 response, serving on the front lines in emergency shelter, and witnessing firsthand the really incredible work our housing authorities do to support our neighbors who are moving from homelessness. This work has strengthened my resolve to advocate for housing authorities at all levels, and a second term would allow me to continue to represent our local housing authority and further focus on advocacy for critical federal allocations, universal vouchers, reliable and consistent funding, and community partnerships to strengthen opportunities for residents. I respectfully asked for your vote to continue serving as a Housing Authority Commissioner, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. A couple of questions. Mr. Friedman.
I don't have a specific question. Very familiar with your work, go back many years, but it's just noting that this is another one where the incumbent, checking the incumbent box is not on the staff report, so if we could correct that when we get the final back. Thank you.
Noted, Councilmember Friedman, and there'll be a few edits that will be made for the next report, and council will be made aware.
Okay, Ms. Gutierrez.
Since you're applying for a second term, I would like to know why you would like to continue the work. Do you have any projects or proposals in mind that you would like to present to the city? If you can give me some more information on why you want to continue the second term.
Sure. So I've learned a lot about the relationship between the housing authorities and different funding and different opportunities to engage residents through program coordination, family self-sufficiency, but also through expansion of vouchers, specifically emergency housing vouchers. And I'd like to continue to advocate for universal vouchers and additional vouchers. So I think you all know we have we need many more opportunities for subsidized housing and for affordable housing for folks who are unhoused or are housed unstably right now. So I'd like to continue to advocate at that level. I was just a couple of months ago appointed as the Vice President of Commissioner Affairs for our regional council, which is the housing authorities in the Pacific Southwest region. And beginning this past January, I was also elected to the national board, and that's a 2-year term. So I would continue serving for the next 2 years. But most of all, I absolutely love being engaged with the Housing Authority and seeing in my day-to-day work and also in just in our community the work that they do, and I'd like to remain closely connected.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else for the Housing Authority Commission? Okay, Living Wage Advisory Committee. Measure P Committee. And let's see, Neighborhood Advisory Council. Rental Housing Mediation Task Force. There we have one.
Mayor Rouse, City Council members, my name is John Beardsmore. I grew up in Santa Barbara. I've lived here for 64 years. I went to all the elementary, junior high, high school, and city college. I decided I didn't want to continue with school, so I got into the building trades. I was a plumber pipe fitter for 35 years. I've worked throughout the county of Santa Barbara, and I've had a pretty busy life working, and I'm also a property owner. I supply housing for residents in Santa Barbara, so I thought being in construction and being a housing provider would be a good fit for this position. I have lived in just about every district in Santa Barbara, and I just think that I could do some good on the board. And this is the first volunteer position that I've ever taken, so.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Beardsmore? All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
Anybody else for the Rental Housing Mediation Board?
Good afternoon. My name is Cindy McCann. Prior to applying to the Rental Housing Mediation Board, I did go on the website and take a look at the description of the board, what it is that they do, and look through the minutes, the past minutes from meetings, so that I have a pretty good understanding of what the board does. I understand that this is a big time commitment, and I agree that I could be available for this time. My schedule is somewhat flexible, so I can also be available as the need might arise. Supporting parties to resolve disputes by helping them to find an equitable solution whereby they have a plan for their resolution. If they come to the board and they can walk away with a plan, saving time, saving them money, saving the city money, is a valuable asset to this community. The reason I chose to apply for this particular board is that I have 25 years plus of commercial real estate background. That includes brokerage, asset management, property management, and as an oversight or a supervisor of tenant improvement construction. As a broker, I've represented both landlords and I've represented tenants, including small business families or Fortune 500 companies and everything in between. Although my career is not specific to dwellings, the concepts and the understanding of the intent of an agreement between two parties and finding a solution so that maybe they can walk away from the table at least with some satisfaction is the goal of any good transaction. My husband and I own a home here. We have for a few years, but due to COVID, thank you, I was able to work from home, and we actually moved permanently to Santa Barbara just under 2 years ago. I recently have kind of downsized my job capacity so that I'm only working in leasing or lease negotiations for a family out of Bakersfield for their commercial office buildings. So I'm finding that I have more time, and I'm really anxious to get involved with this community. So I hope that you will consider that my background and experience might be an asset to this board.
All right, thank you. Any questions here? All right, very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else to the Rental Housing Mediation Board? Santa Barbara Youth Council. Single Family Design Board. Transportation and Circulation Committee. Come on up, please.
Hi, my name is Larry Bickford, and a little bit about my history and why I'd like to be on this committee. It started off when I was on the board of directors of Peabody Charter School, and I was responsible for the traffic safety issues in and around campus. Part of that involved working very closely with city staff on identifying and remarking crosswalks, curb marking, signage. So we had a lot of direct contact with city staff on site and in meetings, and ultimately were quite successful in managing that issue. Also, the crossing guards were an issue at that point. The city was intending on eliminating our crossing guards, and we advocated for increasing their funding and maintaining the crossing guards at both locations. Also during that time period, I was part of the original Safe Routes to School team and worked on developing that program for our local children, including designing curriculum, working the bicycle rodeos, so the kids knew how to deal with that. You guys know about all that. So that was my next thing. And then I became a member of the Coast Board of Directors, and as well as being an active member in SB Bike. And now, as you may know, both organizations are one. Part of that process and being involved with Coast was about developing the original Vision Zero project. And as you know, that is now part of the city. That's been adopted, and work needs to be done there as well. It's an ongoing process. And along with that, I was involved directly with inputting into the pedestrian and bicycle master plan on both the original occasion and the more recent version. And I did that as a member of the Coast Board, as well as a daily bicycle commuter. And one of the questions you asked is, do you have time to do this? Well, now I do, because as of last week, I am officially a retired eye doctor. I saw my last patient last week, and so not going to be doing much bicycle commuting, but I do use my bicycle for errands around the San Roque area. So I'm still on the bike. I plan on staying on my bike. Some years ago, I guess about 4 or 5 years ago, I developed as part of a Coast project, I developed a PowerPoint presentation which was designed to assess red light runners not stopping to make right turns on red at 2 specific locations in the San Roque area, Las Positas in State and Cayo Reales at State. And I was able to document literally thousands of vehicles per day violating the law. Efforts to involve the police department to address that issue, as you may be aware, were not successful. And that problem continues. And it is my intention to redo that presentation, take more videos, get more accounts, and see if anything has changed in the 5 years. Assuming that the city is not doing that and saving me the trouble. But if you guys aren't doing it, I'm going to get some new data and see what's changed over the years. It wasn't appropriate to do it during COVID, but now that COVID's over, is that true? I think I read that somewhere. I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Okay,
That's it on time. Do anybody have any questions for Dr. Bickford? We don't. Thank you very much. Appreciate your replying.
Thank you.
Did I miss anybody out there? No. All right, very good. A couple of announcements. We're going to be doing this 2 more times, applications, one on the 7th at 4 o'clock and one on the 14th at 6 o'clock. We're also requiring everyone who wants to be on a committee or commission to be here in person to do so. All right, very good. And with that, we will go to council committee assignment reports. Ms. Snedden.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. Let's see, I attended a COMB meeting, the Kachuma Operations and Management Board. A few big items. It's been many years in the making, but finally a proclamation to move forward with a secured pipeline, and just really want to emphasize that it's really contributes to better water quality and also to our water resilience and sustainability. And that's a $4 million project that all the member agencies will be paying into. It's already budgeted, but a really collaborative project. Other news there is it continues to be a dry year. There are already spot fires starting around Kachuma, so anticipating that's going to be a continued issue. And then they're also anticipating, this rarely happens, but needing to do fish rescue for those omicas that are endangered, probably by July. And those will be coming to council for approval, the budget, on June 21st. I also attended a Santa Barbara City College Foundation Gala, and really wonderful reminders of what important part of the community the foundation provides in education.
Thank you, Mr. Friedman.
I attended the Park Foundation, it's PARC for the minutes, Foundation, and also attended the retirement reception for Peter Brown and Steve Americaner. I just want to say thank you to both, in particular Mr. Americaner, who is the former city attorney, for all your service to the city of Santa Barbara and many of the agencies that we represent, such as the Central Coast Water Authority, where you were the attorney there for many years. So a great reception, saw some of my colleagues there, but just want to acknowledge both of those gentlemen who served our community well for decades. Thank you.
All right, and I had a very attorney-rich week myself. I got to go out to Price Postel in Parma and hand them the congratulations for 175 years in business. Followed up with the same event that Mr. Friedman was at the Brownstein event. And then Friday night I went to Habitat for Humanity's Gala at the Carriage Museum, where they raised a lot of money, and they do fabulous work for the community, rehabbing old houses, mobile homes, that type of thing for folks. And with that, I believe we are adjourned. We'll be not in session next week, but we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you.